Hi, my name's Charlotte Reeves and I'm from Unleashed Education. Welcome to the second installment of this special 5-part series on understanding layers for pet photographers. In the first episode, I gave you a rundown of what Photoshop layers are and how they work, plus an overview of the different types of layers that it's possible to create. So now that you've seen the different types of layers that you can have, let's have a look at how you can manage these layers. Because as you can see, you can definitely collect a lot of layers. So what can you do with these different layers? First thing, you can change the layer order by clicking and dragging. Really simple one, this. So if I wanted to put this text layer so it's underneath the hue saturation layer, I would just click and drag down there. And now everything above is going to apply to this text layer here because we've put it underneath all of these things. So say I had this color fill layer turned on and it's obliterating everything, but I wanted to move it just under the text layer so I can see the text. You would just click and drag under the text layer. Now we can see the text because the text is sitting on top. So that's a pretty basic one. That's just about layer order. And it all goes back to the pieces of paper sitting on the table. Each one of these layers is a piece of paper. These curves and levels and gradient fill layers, they're kind of like magical little bits of paper or bits of cellophane that you can kind of see through and that affect the bits of paper underneath in different ways. So something else that you can do with layers, which we've pretty much touched on already, is you can turn the visibility on and off. So if I wanted to turn that color fill layer off, I just press on the little eye icon here. And another thing that you can do here, if you would like to only see one of these layers and turn all the rest of them off, all you need to do is hold Option and click. So say I only wanted to see that text layer, hold Option, click on the little icon, and now we can only see the text layer there. It's a little bit hard to see because it's on the transparency. It's the only thing that's visible. Now, if you wanted to go back to the way it was, I would recommend just going back in your history, and that will set the visibility of all those layers back to what they were before you did that. Because if you've got a lot of layers, half of them are on, half of them are off, and then you go and do that, it might be a bit of a mission to try and get things back to how they were. So remember, you've always got the history palette here that you can step back in your history. So what else can you do with layers? You can move your layers. Now, before you do this, a really handy setting that's often overlooked in Photoshop is a move tool setting. So make sure the move tool is selected or press V on the keyboard. Up at the top here on the left-hand side, you've got a little setting that says auto select. Make sure that is ticked and make sure layer is selected from the drop-down menu. So now all you need to do is click on the image with the move tool and it will automatically select that layer. Now where it does get a little bit tricky is where you've got adjustment layers, because sometimes it will click on the adjustment layer. That's not necessarily what you want, but usually it works quite well. So I'm just going to turn these adjustment layers off. So now all we're seeing is the text layer and the Fletcher layer. So if we click on the Fletcher layer just once, it will automatically select that layer. If we click on the text layer, it's going to select that text layer instead. So that also allows you to move that layer around. So I'm going to click on Fletcher and then I can move him around. So something that's going to be really handy for you to help keep track of your layers is the ability to rename your layers. So when you create a layer, it's given a default name. As you can see, gradient fill, curves, levels, layer 0, not very descriptive. So if you wanted to add, say, a hue saturation layer, and that hue saturation layer adds saturation, you might want to change the name of that layer. So all you need to do is double click on the actual text of the layer and then type in a new name for it. So this one might be add extra saturation. Right, so that layer is now called add extra saturation, and just by looking at it, you can see exactly what it does. So what happens if you create a layer and then you decide you don't actually need it? You can turn it off but then it's sitting there cluttering up your layers palette, and you may as well just delete it. So easy way to delete it is just click and drag into the little trash can icon in the layers palette. So another way to keep your layers nice and organized is to group them. Photoshop makes this nice and easy. If you wanted to say put this is Fletcher, so that text layer, and the base layer into a group so they're always together, you would just need to select them both. So you can select multiple layers by pressing Command or Control if you're on a PC and clicking. So I can select as many of these layers as I would like. So say I want the text and the bottom layer in a group, you can just go down to this little create a new group icon in the layers palette, or you can generally access any of these through the menus as well. So if you go to layer and then group layers, you'll also see that you can use a keyboard shortcut to do the same thing. So generally most things that you can access through the menus have a keyboard shortcut. So let's just use the keyboard shortcut instead. So that was Command or Control G. So over in the layers palette here, you can see that it has grouped those two layers into a group called Group 1. Again, nice and descriptive. You can change that to anything you want just by double clicking on the text, typing in a new name for it. So that is now our main group. Now you can open and close that group by clicking the little arrow next to the folder. And you can also reorder that group. So if we wanted to put that on the bottom, we would just click and drag to the bottom and then open it up. So another good thing about groups is you can change the visibility of that group all at once. So instead of having to click both of those layers off, you would just click the group off and it automatically applies that visibility settings to anything within that group. Now, if you later decided that you wanted to move something out of the group or put extra things in the group, again, it's just a matter of clicking and dragging. So say we wanted to turn on this curves adjustment, maybe go in and make a little bit of a change to the properties of that to increase the contrast. And then we decided that that curves adjustment really should be within this group. All you need to do is click and drag into that group. And then maybe give it a new name. So increase contrast. And so the opposite of that, if you wanted to take it out of that group for whatever reason, just click and drag. Nice and easy. Now, if you want to get really organized, you can actually have nested groups. So you can have groups within groups. So if you wanted to create a group to say, put the bottom layer in, you would just go down here and click this little icon here, which is create a new group. And that group is now within the main group. So I'm going to call this one sub. And then we can put anything we want in that group as well. So let's put layer 0 in the subgroup. Now, it's important to remember that if you delete a group, you are also going to be deleting everything in that group. So if I decided I didn't want this main group anymore, which would be silly because we would lose the picture of Fletcher, I could just drag that to the bin and it gets rid of the entire group and everything in it. So be very careful when you're deleting groups. I'm just going to go back in the history to fix that. So I think that pretty much covers the basics of groups. If you have any questions about any of the content that I've covered in this video, please post them in the comments and I'll get back to you. And if you did enjoy the video, please subscribe to our Unleashed Education channel. I'll catch you in the next installment of this special series on understanding and working with layers in Photoshop, where we're going to be finding out how to get layers interacting with each other using opacity and blending modes. Can't wait, I'll catch you soon.